So a lot of people call Rust Cohle a nihilist, which he is, but he's more specifically an antinatalist. So nihilism just means you don't believe there's any inherent value in the universe. To some extent, nothing really matters. But Rust Cohle goes further. He says that existence itself is not a positive thing, it's a negative thing. So when you bring someone into existence, at least bring a human into existence, you're not giving them a gift, you're actually doing a great disservice on par with killing them. At one point he says, the hubris it must take to yank a soul out of non-existence. That's one of the first antinatalist quotes I think I've ever heard on TV, and that's what made Rust Cohle such an interesting character. Now, some antinatalists believe that all existence for all animals is pain and is a negative, but most seem to think there's something specific about human existence, human consciousness that's particularly pernicious. And at one point Rust Cohle says, I think human consciousness was a great misstep in evolution. And he says this is because nature created a part of itself that felt it was outside of nature, and we labor under the illusion of having a self, and this is where the Buddhism of Rust Cohle comes into play. And with his meditation and the crucifix on his wall, so why he loves the crucifix is, he says, it's this idea of allowing your own death and finding peace in death. And when he looks at those crime scene photos of the people right before their death, he's looking for some kind of awareness that death is not a tragedy. Death is actually the end of this raw deal, as he calls it. And he says, look, we should, as brothers and sisters, we should opt out of this raw deal. And it's unclear whether he means we should all commit mass suicide or whether he means we should just stop having kids and kind of fade out. So some antinatalists, again, they are pro-suicide and pro-people actually killing themselves. Others just say, well, no, once you come into existence, to some extent you should stick it out, but we shouldn't add new people to existence. So anyways, how did Rust get to this very extreme ideology? He worked many years undercover as a high-level drug dealer. So doing this, two things. One, he took a lot of drugs, in particular psychedelics, LSD, and as he said it, to some extent kind of seemed to be mainlining the secret truth of the universe. So he seemed to reach this level where he understood Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. And basically what that means is since time is infinite, and time just goes on and on and on, and eventually so many years pass, eventually almost an infinite number of years pass, all the things that happen will happen again, because if you let time run long enough and you let probability, even if the probability of me having this exact same interaction with the exact same phone in a universe where everything's exactly the same, even if that probability is 0.0000001, a tiny probability, given enough time, which if you believe that the universe just goes on and on and on, some people don't. Some people believe the universe expands, and then contracts, and eventually we're going to have a big crunch and the universe will end. But most people seem to believe in a steady state theory of the universe, that time just goes on and on and on. So if you believe time just goes on and on and on, no matter how small the probability that I'm going to have this exact same interaction with the same camera again, eventually it's going to happen. So eternal recurrence, Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence is that everything you do in your life, eventually, at some point, maybe so many years, countless years in the future, but at some point, everything you've done in your life is going to happen again. So whatever you do, be prepared for this to happen again and again and again. And then also being involved with these gangs and dealing with cartels, he experienced and was exposed to unspeakable brutality. And he tells some of the war stories about just the savagery that he experienced. So if someone believes that to some extent you don't have free will, and he also talks about this, that we're like carts and you can't change your path, and we only think that we have free will because we experience time in a certain way, but if you could step outside a human perspective and actually see the universe as it actually exists, you would see that you don't really have any free will at all. So how do you reconcile the existence of evil and brutality with the fact that you don't have free will, you can't really change it, and all the evil that he's been exposed to, every dead body, every horrific crime, he's going to see that body again and again, and that crime is going to occur on that person again and again. So when you combine these two factors, the brutality he's seen and Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, that these horrible things happen again and again and again, and you can't have any power to change them, that's where you get his antinatalism. And Rust Cohle feels that this is the true nature of reality. This isn't just his perception based on his own personality. No, he thinks this is the true objective nature of the world, and everyone else who doesn't share his view, which is obviously the vast majority of people, well, they don't see this because they live under illusions, an illusion of self, all the illusions of religion, and this is where you get his religious fervor because he feels like all of religion, it's just these comforting stories that people tell each other to deal and cope with the fundamental bleakness of the universe that they were thrust into. And I will mention that I think True Detective presents this philosophy, but ultimately rejects it. And that's the arc of Rust Cohle throughout the season, is him rejecting this. And we see other people who I think have the same philosophy. So Reggie Ledoux, I think he would probably have very similar views, nihilistic views, antinatalist views, but his response, because he's evil at his core, is to go out into this kind of place where he's removed from time, removed from society, and can just live out all these urges in this kind of ahistorical, atemporal paradise. And that's what I think Carcosa is. Carcosa is removing yourself from society, of these illusions of good and evil, all these restraints, and putting yourself in this chaos that is the fundamental nature of existence, where it's brutal and you're removed from time. You recognize the true nature of existence and eternity, and that's what Carcosa is, whether it's Errol's labyrinth that he sets up where it's just a maze and you just get lost, and again you're suddenly in this new altered state of consciousness, or Reggie Ledoux's compound out where he's making, I think it's meth he's making, and he has sex slaves and he's just walking around in his underwear and a gas mask, and again he's just completely removed from society and civilization. It's very Kurt's Heart of Darkness, similar idea. And Errol, when he's in his labyrinth, he says, this is Carcosa. But again, I don't think Carcosa is just that physical, geographical place. I think Carcosa is any place removed from civilization, removed from society, removed from these illusions, where you've just embraced this dark, chaotic, anarchic reality that is the true nature of existence. But again, towards the end of the season, I think this view is rejected by Rust, who was the major proponent of it. So anyways, very interesting philosophy, and it's an awesome show. You should check out both seasons. Everyone says season 2 is worse. Don't listen to them. Season 2 is I won't say better because they're so different, it's hard to compare, but season 2 is just as good as season 1. I like it better. So check out both seasons. It's an awesome show.